Yeah. Okay, so hi everybody, my name is Jonah. Today I'm going to be presenting a talk titled Mistakes That Make You WannaCry, where I'm going to go through the WannaCry ransomware campaign and talk about some of the mistakes that the authors made which could have hindered the profits, the success of the ransomware, and could allow people to decrypt their files in some instances. So I'm a PhD student. I'm researching ransomware at CSIRT, Queen's University. I've been interested in InfoSec for quite a long time, throughout my undergrad and beyond anyway. It feels like a long time. I compete in capture flag competitions with our team Cult of the Dead Carrot, so on like CTF time and stuff like that. I'm also on Twitter @_CryptoCat, so if you want to see a lot of mostly malware related tweets, you can follow me there. I'm going to start with a little bit of background. I will assume that most people know what ransomware is, but just so we're on the same page. Ransomware is a type of malware that prevents or limits users from accessing their system until a ransom has been paid. There are we can categorize ransomware into two broad categories, being lockers and then crypto ransomware. So lockers would be typically quite a lot easier to remove from the system, not actually going to do anything to the data. Crypto ransomware is a more difficult problem which has been getting a lot of prominence over the past few years. Speaking of crypto ransomware then, the first piece of crypto ransomware was actually the AIDS Trojan in 1989, also known as PC Cyborg Trojan. This was distributed on 20,000 floppy disks at the World Health Organization's AIDS conference. And ransomware has come a long way since then, so there wasn't really much happening on the crypto ransomware scene for a good while. Over the past sort of 5-10 years, this has really picked up. You can see it was estimated that in 2015, victims paid out a total of 24 million, and in 2016, this grew to over 1 billion. Obviously, it's quite hard to get these statistics. A lot of companies, people don't want to say that they have paid, so a lot of it's down to kind of tracking Bitcoin addresses and stuff like that, and just estimates based on what we would expect what the payment rate has been based on the amount of infected systems, stuff like that. I've listed a couple of well-known variants of ransomware here: Locky, Cerber, Petra, TeslaScript. There's plenty more. I'm not going to go into detail on them, but I just listed ones which have been quite successful in terms of the amount of systems they've infected, the amount of revenue they've been able to retrieve, and how long that they've really lasted. Interesting, I've put here a couple which I'll talk a little bit about. I say interesting in terms that they have features which generally aren't used throughout ransomware. Some potentially innovative features which we might see more of, or we might see ransomware start to go in some of these directions in future. The Jigsaw was a piece of ransomware which incrementally deletes files every hour, so it might delete a file after the first hour, up to 2 files after the second hour, etc. Also, if you try to end the process, if you try to exit the process or restart your computer or take any action which appears to be maybe trying to subvert the ransomware, then it will penalize you by deleting 1,000 files. There is a free decryptor available for Jigsaw, although I don't think it was really a big problem in the wild anyway compared to some of those well-known ones. Popcorn Time, another interesting one. The authors of this claim to be computer science students from Syria who are raising money for food, medicine, shelter, etc. They offer a chance to obtain your decryption key free of charge by infecting 2 other people. So if you infect 2 other people and they pay the ransom, then apparently you'll get your key free of charge. In order to verify that, you would need 2 people to go and pay the ransom, so whether this is legit or not, I'm really not too sure, but it's an interesting concept. Kulova was, as far as I can see, maybe just an in-development piece of ransomware. I don't think it was really circulated in the wild. It might have been created by some researchers or something like that, because in order to decrypt your files, all you had to do was read 2 ransomware-related security articles, so there wasn't really a ransom in terms of payment for that. Fatboy, another one. I think this is interesting. It's a ransomware as a service offering and has quite a few interesting features. The most notable is that it uses the Big Mac index, so there's an index to the price of a Big Mac in every country around the world. Whenever it infects a system, it will look up the IP address, look up the location, and based on the location that you're in, it will look up the price of Big Mac and decide, okay, how much can they afford to pay in a ransom. So this has always been an interesting issue. If you set a ransom too high, you're going to get a lot of lower level companies and people that aren't going to pay. Whereas if you set it quite low, you'll get organizations which would have probably paid out a lot more who will be on the same generic level. So what are some of the problems for defenders and analysts in terms of ransomware? Crypto is one of them. So if crypto has been implemented correctly, it's virtually impossible to decrypt files. If we have an RSA key with a 2048-bit modulus, estimates suggest it could take 6.4 quadrillion years to decrypt on a standard desktop machine. Obfuscation, another issue which applies to malware in general. So packing is often used to evade signature-based antivirus detection. This can be quite basic packers, which are trivial to unpack. Sometimes more custom packers are used. And then evasion. So whenever you run malware or ransomware, it may not reveal its true nature in a VM, so it may be checking to see are there any virtual machine or any VMware or VirtualBox processes running. It might check is there a debugger present, is it being attached to a debugger. And things like that. It might just have a timer on it to try and fool like analysis systems that would only run a sample for 10 minutes or something like that. And on the network side, it may spam telemetry messages, so send out a lot of IP addresses, only one of which is actually a server listening for the command and control server listening for the connection. I have just an example here of a typical or an example of a ransomware attack, kind of full process. So here we have maybe some social engineering will be done on the victim, looking at their social media and stuff like that to generate a phishing email, let's say, with a malicious attachment or an embedded URL that's malicious. So say the victim clicks on the URL, they're redirected to a landing page, which could be a website that's just been set up to hold like an exploit kit. It could be a website that's been compromised, so it's called a watering hole attack if a legitimate website is hosting some malicious content. So in that case, the exploit kit will scan the browser, look at the operating system, the version of the browser, the plugin, stuff like that, deliver the relevant exploit, and through that they can drop the payload, which in this case would be a ransomware payload, using symmetric or asymmetric encryption. Normally, successful ransomware strains use a hybrid between these two. And then it will make its call out to its command and control service, so maybe through Tor, sending information, retrieving information. At the same time, the victim's files will have been encrypted. They'll be redirected to a payment site, normally a hidden service on Tor, and they'll make the payment. It'll go through to the operator's wallets, who will then probably tumble the coins, maybe exchange them into a more anonymous currency, and then try to cash them out or reinvest them in some other illicit goods. So the WannaCry attack. So most of you probably have heard quite a bit about how the attack went down. It used the Eternal Blue and Double Pulsar exploits. These were stolen from the NSA and leaked by the shadow brokers. In order to propagate, if you on Windows XP or above, if you had the default configuration with the SMB port 445 open, then you were vulnerable, or if you already had a double pulsar backdoor installed. Interestingly, this wasn't the first piece of malware to use these exploits. I know there was quite a prominent piece of Bitcoin mining malware that was using these exploits previously. And actually, if you've been infected by that, it would have closed the port 445 afterwards. So if you had been infected, you would have kind of been vaccinated from getting hit by WannaCry. Some characteristics about WannaCry. It uses RSA 2048-bit and AES 128-bit encryption. So as we said there, with a standard desktop machine, it could take 6.4 quadrillion years to decrypt, to crack a 2048-bit RSA key. But it's quite a slow process if you want to encrypt all the files on the system. So what they'll do is they'll generate a unique public-private key pair for each victim. The private key will then be encrypted with their own public key that would have like a master key. And then your public RSA key will, a new 128-bit AES key will be generated for every file on the system, and this will be encrypted with the RSA key which you still have the public key, you just don't have the private key to decrypt it. So that makes it a lot quicker to go through, and obviously if you're able to crack one of these AES keys, it's only going to get you access to that one file back. It also deletes any Windows backups that you'll have on the system. It demands a ransom of $300, which increases $600 after 72 hours, and I think after 7 days you will, they say that you'll lose your data altogether. It allows a few random files to be decrypted free of charge, so I think 10 files can be decrypted. This is using a hard-coded key found in WannaCry, but it would be the exact same process if you did actually the private key that's encrypted with their public key. If they were to decrypt it with their private key, then theoretically that should just you should just be able to run the decrypt option in WannaCry and recover your data. It infected more than 500,000 systems across 150 countries. Now, I've seen some different figures regarding this. There was an Intel botnet tracker that was tracking the spread of WannaCry. I'm sure quite a lot of these systems are down to analysis as well. So the true scale is not really known, but there was a lot of victims anyway. I've got a list of types of victims are included here, an example of each. Obviously, there were many more, and it wasn't just the NHS that was hit. There were other hospitals, other transportation systems, etc. So it was quite wide-reaching. Microsoft did release a patch for Windows XP. It was the first since 2014. However, researchers at Kaspersky reported that 98% of victims were running Windows 7, and an insignificant amount were running Windows XP. Now, I saw another security company that was saying it was more like 60% were running Windows 7. So there's obviously some dispute over that, but there seemed to be a general agreement that Windows XP wasn't as big an issue as was reported in quite a lot of media at the beginning. Microsoft also issued a public statement which was highly critical about government agencies stockpiling vulnerabilities. They didn't mention any names specifically, but it was quite clear what they were getting at and who they were talking to. So the profits, as of the 2nd of August, I think they had received 52.2 bitcoins, which was $140,000 from 338 payments. On the 3rd of August, they started to move the bitcoins, and they ended up going and transferring those into Monero, I believe, through Shapeshift to try and add, as it's a more anonymous currency. So when we compare that to other ransomware attacks, doesn't seem to be very profitable. CryptoLocker made $300,000 in its first 100 days, and that was back in 2013. So this was coming up to 3 months that we were talking with WannaCry getting $140,000. Cerber made nearly $200,000 in a single month, and I believe that had only a 0.3% payment rate. And CryptoWall made $325 million. I'm not too sure what the range of dates is for that statistic, though. So why did WannaCry fail to collect as much money as previous ransomware campaigns, despite having access to some pretty sophisticated exploits? So I'm going to go through 4 kind of categories here. The first issue was the payment tracking. So they only used 3 Bitcoin addresses to track payments. Successful campaigns will usually generate a unique Bitcoin address for each victim. So the way that they did it makes it difficult to verify who is paid, and it makes it easy for law enforcement and for researchers to track. But they did actually try to implement unique Bitcoin addresses for each victim. There was a race condition, which meant that didn't work, and it just defaulted to the 3 that are actually in the code. The check payment button doesn't actually work. I think the functionality behind this should have been it was going to send a .res file and a .eky file. The .res file would have some information about the user, the amount of files that were encrypted and stuff like that, and then the .eky key is the encrypted private key, so that then they could decrypt that private key and send it back, and then you'd be able to decrypt your files. But obviously, they're not able to verify the payments without that, with the way the Bitcoin tracking was set up. So the way they got around that, they sent out a message to all victims advising to use the contact button, where in that case a human operator is required to manually ask each victim which Bitcoin address they're going to send the ransom from. But the problem is if they've already sent the ransom, so if I'd been affected by WannaCry and I see, okay, there's this Bitcoin address, they want $300, I could quite easily go and look on the blockchain and see who was the last person that sent money to this address? Okay, it was 5 minutes ago, they sent this amount of Bitcoin from this address. I can go on a contact and say, I just did this 5 minutes ago, where's my decryption key? So I can't really see an easy way for them to be able to verify that. The only way that they could do it is to say, okay, don't send the payment until you've told us what address you're going to be sending it from and how much you're going to be sending, and then, but yeah, so it's obviously a slow manual process considering how many machines were infected by this and how many people were probably willing to go and pay the ransom. There have been some who complain they didn't receive a key, and those who did obviously aren't generally too quick to say that they paid the ransom, so we don't really know the full figures. The second issue is the kill switch. So when WannaCry is executed, it tries to connect to this hard-coded URL. Basically, if this responds, so if the domain resolves, it'll take no further action. So there was an accidental hero, as he was labeled by most of the media, Malware Tech, and he found that the domain wasn't registered, went and quickly registered it himself. More variants came out, but by this time most users had already been patched. I think by the time he registered the domain, a lot of companies in the US and people in the US hadn't started like getting ready for business, setting on the computers, stuff like that. So it probably reduced the effect in the US particularly quite a lot. So yeah, and there were more variants that came out. To say there was another one quite quickly that had a different hard-coded URL, and it was registered by another security researcher, and then eventually ones that had no kill switch at all, but by then, yeah, most users are patched. So why was the kill switch included? Some have speculated it may have been an anti-analysis technique or as a means of stopping the malware if it got out of control. So if you were running a sandbox, if you're running an analysis environment and you wanted to see if this malware is going to make a connection out to this address, and you think that's a command and control server, you want to see what's it going to try and send or what's it going to try and request. That might be down. The command control server may have been taken down a while ago, or you may not just want to make that connection. So if you might just kind of spoof that, just resolve the DNS anyway, just to try and see what it does. In that case, you would see that it does nothing because this is live. I'm not too sure if that was the reason. If so, I don't think it's a very good anti-analysis technique. But well, if either of those were the case anyway, they obviously made a mistake of failing to pre-register the domain. I'm sure it hindered their profits. So let's talk about file recovery. So there was some researchers at Kaspersky who reported on some of these techniques based on the way that WannaCry in Crypts Files. Whenever it encrypts files, it reads from the original file, encrypts the content, and saves it with the extension .wanacrypt. After the encryption, it moves the .wanacrypt file to .wanacry and then deletes the original file. This deletion logic may vary depending on the location and the properties of the victim's files, potentially enabling file recovery. So we can take a look at some of these scenarios. The first is files stored on the system drive and your C drive on important folders, so like desktop and documents. These files won't be retrievable. They're overwritten with random data before the removal, so we can't get them back with any forensics tools. But all other files are moved to your app data temp directory with like a decimal number .wanacrypt, and they'll be deleted without being overwritten if they weren't in an important location. So this may allow us to retrieve some of these files using standard data recovery techniques. Just to mention as well, now the researchers behind this didn't specify any important folders beside desktop and documents. I found that files in pictures and music and stuff like that are recoverable, so it may actually just be documents and desktop that they do that on. There are some folders which just will not be encrypted at all. Intel, program data, Windows, program files 86, your app data local temp, local settings temp, temporary internet files, and an interesting one, if I can scroll down. No. Okay. If you had a folder called "This folder protects against ransomware, modifying it will reduce protection," then it wouldn't have been touched. If all your important folders were inside a folder with that name, then it would have been fine. Okay. The second thing is files on non-system drives. So if you've got your C drive, you've got a couple of other hard drives, WannaCry will deal with the files slightly differently. It will create a recycle folder and set hidden system attributes, making it visible in the standard Windows configuration. The original files are supposed to move to this folder after the encryption, but due to synchronization errors in the code, this doesn't always happen. In fact, for me, it didn't happen on any of the samples or operating systems or anything that I tried it on. But the files aren't deleted securely, so we should be able to still recover them with the file recovery software. The third, I did have problems with this. Files that are set to read-only should be easily recoverable. So the researchers that discovered these techniques indicated that WannaCry will only create an encrypted copy of these files, and then so it will create an encrypted copy, but rather than deleting the original, it will simply apply the hidden attribute to it. So you should just be able to go to View Hidden Files and Folders, and you'll still have the original. And then we can just modify the attribute, and it should be back. I tried this on 4 different operating systems, probably about 15, 20 different samples, with a variety of techniques for modifying the permissions and things like that, and didn't have any luck. Tried contacting the researchers, so if anybody has any tips on that, be interested here. So I'll just I'll exit this and see if I can go quick demo. What's the time right there? 25 minutes. So I'll try and have a snapshot saved here of Okay, so Windows 10 operating system I have here. I've put some files around the place. Just I'm going to focus just on a couple of the examples. So we have a read-only file here and a writable file beside it. They're both on a folder on the desktop, which is an important location. So they shouldn't be recoverable, but because this is read-only, this apparently shouldn't be deleted. The images I've used here, I've kind of specified what type of file it is, where it's located, because I have a lot of different kind of, mostly like cat pictures and stuff on here. So whenever you're going through the file recovery software, you see a lot of cats, and you're like, was that in an important location or not an important location? Was it read-only? Was it? So I have some pictures, videos, music, stuff like that. I'm not really going to focus on those. If we go to C drive, I have a not important folder. So because this is a not important location, it should be deleted, but we should be able to recover it because it's not securely deleted. I have a file here just on a C drive, which we should be able to, it shouldn't even be encrypted. As I say, there are certain folders that they'll try not to touch just in case it does anything to the operating system, which is going to prevent you being able to actually make the payment. And then we have a secondary drive here, non-system drive, so we should be able to recover that as well. So I will run, okay, I'll run the WannaCry sample. Okay, so as we know, whenever these files get deleted, they'll get moved to this temp directory first with the decimal dot one crypt. Okay. Sorry, I don't have Malwarebytes on my desktop machine. So we have our ransom note there. You can see 3 days till payment increases, 7 days till the data is lost. So you can see this is filled up with the .1crypt files now. I'm just going to wait a moment until these are until most of these will be removed. Okay, so most of those have been removed. I'm going to go and open up, I'm going to use FTK imager here. It's either this or autopsy. I'll generally use this kind of task, but autopsy, you have to create a case and can be a bit slower loading things up. So we'll add the C drive here. I'll just show as well, if you go back to the read-write folder that I had. It has encrypted the 2 files, read-only, writable, with view in hidden folders, but we don't have we can't see the original there. Okay, so if we go into the C drive and go to our temp directory. Oops, sorry, that's the wrong user. Thought that was going to be demo over then. Okay. Try and list these by size because we'll see kind of some of the bigger images and stuff like that at the top. Okay. Okay, it's not actually showing. Right, okay. Sorry, I thought this would end up happening on the demo. 2 seconds. I have turn off the sound. So I'll just skip to where I was going to the same sort of place here. It's the exact same process. This I'd had a couple of times and this didn't work for me. I'll explain in a minute why I think that may be. But if we go into the app data and temp, I'm changing that by size, and then if we start scrolling through some of them, you can see we've got a couple of MP3 files. Got our cat pictures from my pictures location. So these can just be exported to the desktop and easily recovered in that way. Let's export it on there now. Let's try and skip through, so I'm conscious of time. The other thing is I scrolled down through here just to show that the only one that we were able to recover in terms of the images we were focusing on was the file that was not in an important location, which is the one that we were focusing on now. The other thing was the system drive. So if I add on the second drive there, you can see that it has created a recycle folder, but due to the synchronization error, it didn't actually go in there. If we just go to the root directory where I had the original image, then it's recoverable. It wasn't securely overwritten. And yeah, that's basically it. What I was going to kind of show at the end there is, in my experience of running this, you have this hipsys.1crypt, which if you look at the size of it, if you keep refreshing this, it will keep increasing until, if you leave it for a while, you'll eventually get the message on the bottom of your screen saying your computer's running out of memory. It will eat up all the memory and then it will delete it. So these files are only going to, obviously they've been deleted, they haven't been securely deleted, but if you have something like that that's running and going over all the hard drive space, then you've only got a limited amount of time. You either need to suspend that process or get things done pretty quickly. Okay. So, Decryptor is the other thing then. So, Decryptor was released for WannaCry. The way WannaCry works, it deletes the decryption keys from the system, but it doesn't erase the prime numbers that we use to generate the keys from memory before freeing the associated memory. So this means that the prime numbers can be retrieved from RAM, can be used to generate a new decryption key, and there were tools created to do this. So there's a WannaKey tool, which released Windows XP, and WannaKiwi for Windows Vista 7 Server 2003, 2008. These were combined. I think the two different authors worked together, so now we have WannaKiwi, which work on any of these operating systems. Officially 32-bit. I've tried it on some 64-bit systems, and the only one I could get it to work on was my only 32-bit system, which is Windows XP. Obviously, this will only work if the prime numbers remain in memory, so if you restart your computer, if you start opening a lot of applications and files and stuff like that, the prime numbers are going to be gone. So I do have another demo for that. So this should go all right. Okay, I may actually, see I've only got 15 minutes, so I may just quickly flick through the...
Okay, so this demo we have our WannaCry file, we have...
I'll talk through it in person. Okay, yeah, so just create a file here. Just put some text into it. And I'm going to load this up just so that we can run WannaKiwi from there. Just to note the .wannaCry executable there. If it's called something else, I originally had this named the MD5 of the sample, and the tool wasn't working for me. It's specifically looking for wannaCry.exe, so I had to rename it just to for WannaKiwi to actually work. I'm sure, obviously, that could be pretty easy to modify WannaKiwi to deal with that, but so run the sample. You can see that it has been encrypted there. I've opened the file, the same, it's been encrypted. Basically waiting here and going through to make sure that this new file gets deleted first, so it's gone through the full process of encrypting and deleting the files. So it's now been deleted, and I'll go in and run the WannaKiwi process. I'm going to pause that to see if you can actually, probably can't really see too much there. But it starts just by searching for the actual, searching for primes in memory, finds prime 1, prime 2, saves the private key to the .dky file, and then it basically just loops through all files in the file system looking for anything that has a .wannaCry extension, and then uses that decryption key to decrypt the contents. So you can see again, we now have our new text files back, so it decrypted this. If you leave WannaCry running when you're doing this, there's a good chance by the time you go to open this file, it's been encrypted again, so suspend the process maybe, or obviously you need to be, if you get hit by WannaCry, you need to be quite aware that this decryptor's out there. If you restart your computer or take any action, start opening a lot of stuff, then you're going to lose the chance to use this tool. I think that's about that. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about attribution. Were individual actors responsible, and was their goal to actually make money here? So We talked about some mistakes, particularly with like the Bitcoin tracking system, the kill switch and stuff like that. Although new variants came out, it didn't actually appear that these updates were produced by the original authors. It looked like the binary had been modified rather than the actual source code, which isn't very typical of a for-profit malware group. They're likely to make sure they get as much money as they can. If they find a mistake, they'll put out an update and try and get as much money as they can. So it was strange that that didn't happen. What about state actors? So North Korea, the Lazarus Group, Russia, US. There was some code reused by the Lazarus Group, but I mean, code reuse is pretty common in general. And in the malware scene, you know, if you're on forums and stuff like that, there's just code going around. I don't think it's a very solid attribution. However, the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre apparently attributed WannaCry to Lazarus. They didn't publicly confirm this or deny it, but a source indicated to The Guardian that they had led an international investigation and had determined that it was likely North Korea behind it. The NSA also came to the same conclusion, reported by the Washington Post, but again, it was an internal conclusion, it was an internal assessment. Some have argued that WannaCry and NotPetya marked the dawn of a new strategy of state-sponsored attacks. So WannaCry and NotPetya came out quite quick. NotPetya came out not too long after WannaCry, and they have some similarities, obviously, in the sense of the exploits that they use. NotPetya, I think I don't think you can really make the argument that there was any intention of making money from it. WannaCry is a bit more difficult. You know, they did make some money from it, and it can be, you could just say they just weren't very good at making money, or they could have just been better at making it look like they wanted to make money than those behind NotPetya did. So I think that's interesting. In cases like that, if it's not about money, you have to kind of have a look and see what would be the objective, who's gained and who's lost from that in terms of nation states, in terms of groups. I'll not go into any mad conspiracy theories on it. So others simply think it's just amateurs who were able to piece together some sophisticated exploits and do little more than that, which is certainly a possibility. I just think with the timing of NotPetya as well, I have some suspicions over it anyway. And how reliable is attribution anyway? So if anybody's heard of the Vault 7 Marble framework, this was released by WikiLeaks. It was some CIA documentation where they talk about training their operatives to basically fake attribution, to use code in different languages, to reuse code from other groups in order to misdirect forensic investigations. So there are agencies, this has been leaked from the CIA, but I'm sure it's not only the CIA that are actively trying to falsify attribution. So, and how important is it anyway? Does it just detract from some more important issues, like the fact that these vulnerabilities are still being introduced in software, companies aren't implementing security by design, governments are stockpiling vulnerabilities and developing exploits, and in the end making the internet less secure for everybody. Lessons learned, what can we take away from WannaCry? Malware authors make mistakes, and white hats can use this to their advantage. So by slowing down infections, for example, by finding a kill switch, or by defeating the ransomware altogether through the development of a decryptor. Vulnerabilities need to be disclosed responsibly, should go without saying, but they should be responsibly disclosed, not hoarded and exploited by three-letter agencies. And how to defend, so most of you will have heard these generic sort of advice plenty of times, but keep your operating system software up to date, particularly security-related patches. Keep offline backups. Now, this isn't really a defense, it's a recovery method. It doesn't change the fact that you've been compromised, but at least you'll get your data back. Use reputable and properly configured security products. Educate users. So for a long time, they've been considered as the weakest link and might open phishing emails or click on links that they shouldn't do. People have been trying to educate users for a long time, and the problem doesn't seem to be getting any better, so maybe some developers and security architects need to start looking at more technical solutions to take some of that burden away from the users. I don't know. Be prepared. So there are some companies reportedly stockpiling bitcoins in case they get hit by ransomware. Even if you don't get hit by ransomware, if you have been stockpiling bitcoins, then I don't think, you're still doing pretty well from it. And don't pay the ransom, or immediately at least. You may not get your data back. A decryptor may be developed soon or not so soon. In the case of Petya, whenever NotPetya came out, the original Petya author of the 3 variants released a master key to decrypt. So anybody who had any of the 3 Petya variants in the past, and if they have their data, their encrypted data backed up, they can now decrypt them. And it encourages malware authors to, who will probably invest in ever more sophisticated malware, and encourages future generations of cyber criminals to join the ransomware game. Yeah, that's my talk. Thanks for listening. Any questions?